Hi, this is Tim Yoder with Fit Small Business. I've been a CPA for 26 years, and today I want to teach you how to use QuickBooks Online. So today's lesson is about a 1 hour overview of how to use the product. If you're familiar with bookkeeping software, this should probably be enough to introduce you to QuickBooks Online so that you can get in and kind of learn how to use it on your own. It's a very user-friendly software. If after this video you need more details, we have Fit Small Business has 46 free QuickBooks Online tutorials. Each of them have a video as well as in-depth screenshots to help you through all of the major processes. To find those, just simply Google Fit Small Business free QuickBooks Online tutorials, and I'll also throw a link below this video in YouTube so that you can find that page. So let's start with just the basic navigation around QuickBooks Online. I'll share my QuickBooks Online screen with you. Okay, so this is we're in Payroll right now. The first place we want to be able to look is in our dashboard. Okay, so the dashboard is going to give you some basic information about your company. There's really three main areas we want to learn to navigate to. The first is this company settings in the cogwheel up here. If you click on this is where you're going to make all of kind of your permanent changes to your company. So any company settings will be here, chart of accounts will be here, product lists that you have in inventory will be here, things that don't really deal with any particular customer or vendor or transaction. So more kind of the permanent items for your company information will be up in this cogwheel. The second area that's important to navigate to is this new button. This is where you can go to initiate any new transactions. Now in QuickBooks Online, you'll find there are always several different ways to get to the same screen. However, I'm showing you kind of the basic way that I like to navigate. As you get experience, you may find that you like to do something else. But I like to initiate all my new transactions from this new button. And so here we have all these transactions listed by type. So here are all the transactions that deal with customers. Here's all the transactions that deal with vendors, employees, and then some other transactions. So this new button, you wouldn't go here if you want to enter a new type of inventory, right? That's a permanent item. That would be in the cogwheel. This would be new transaction. So perhaps the purchase of an inventory item. That's a transaction. For that, you would go to this new button. And the third place we need to be familiar with is this left menu bar in QuickBooks Online. So this is where I like to say this is where you go to manage your company. So if you want to look at outstanding invoices, we can go to sales and we can go to the overview. This is what I like to call our sales center. So this gives us an overview, gives us all sales, it gives us our customer list. Notice within customer list, actually within all of these, it's going to give us the two estimates we've had. We have some unbilled activity, we have 6 invoices that are overdue, and we have 13 open pledges. So most companies will not be dealing with pledges. That's something that would be more for nonprofits. But this is what I like to call our sales center or our customer center, and it shows us all of our sales and customer activity. Now notice you can actually initiate a new transaction from this screen here. Like I said, there's multiple places to initiate all of your various transactions. Okay, so that's our customer center. What I would like to call our vendor center is going to be down here in our expenditures. So if we go to vendors, this is where we can monitor kind of all of our vendors. So we have purchase orders, we have bills that are overdue, and we have bills that have been paid. Again, we can come up here and we can create a new vendor, or we could import vendors from a spreadsheet. Good. So those are kind of your major areas. Maybe one other area we can talk about is reports. If you go down here, here's where we'll talk about this in more detail a little bit later today. But this is where you can go to reports to print out your most common reports. Okay, so that's kind of a basic navigation of QuickBooks Online. You got your cogwheel for your permanent items, you've got your new button for your new transactions, and then you've got your left menu bar to kind of find information out about outstanding bills, outstanding customer invoices, or really any of the other things that go along with managing your company. Great, so let's go into a little bit more detail on setting up your company. So we're going to do this from the cogwheel, right? Because this is setting up the company. This is kind of all the permanent information. So let's go up to our cogwheel and let's first look at the basic information and options. So we're going to go under your company here to account and settings. And this first part under company, this is where you're going to enter your very basic information. So you can see I have my tax form set up as a nonprofit organization. That's why it was giving me the option to collect pledges. But let's go ahead and let's change it to a corporation. Okay, so here's where we set up all our basic information. Notice you can actually upload an invoice, upload a logo right here, and that'll make that logo available to put on various forms like invoices. The next important tab here would be our sales tab, and this is really important. So if you want to set up your invoices, you're going to go to this customize look and feel button. And we do have some, we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but we also have a couple of videos in our more expanded version of the tutorial that deal with customizing your invoices. So you can change colors, you can change layouts, you can change what appears on it. Very, very flexible. You can even import a PDF of an invoice template you design outside of QuickBooks Online. The only warning I would give you about that is if you import a PDF of an invoice, once it's imported, you can't do any more customization of that within QuickBooks. Okay, sales form content. This stuff is very important. So if you turn something off here, it won't appear on your input screen when you're creating a sales form. So that would be like a sales order, sales invoice, sales receipt. Okay, so if you turn something off here, it won't appear on that screen. So if you're ever trying to learn how to do something and the tutorial you're watching, that screen doesn't match the screen you have on your QuickBooks, it's probably because you have something turned off here. You need to turn it on so that it appears on your input screen so that you can use that field. Okay, great. So that's your sales settings. Very important. Let's talk about our chart of accounts. So let's click out of here and again go up to our cogwheel and go to our chart of accounts. Okay, so here's your chart of accounts. You can create a new account by clicking new up here. Okay, you need to give it an account type, etc. You can delete accounts here. However, if you have used the account before, it won't allow you to delete the account, because if it did, those transactions would be deleted and then your books would be out of balance. So once an account is used, you can never delete it. However, you can come here and make it inactive. And what that does is make it so that you can't post any new transactions to that account. Okay, and so that is how we deal with our chart of accounts. You need to be able to set up your customers and vendors. So these are something that are not just kind of a permanent item to your company, but deal with customers and vendors. So it's not going to be in our cogwheel. It's going to be over here in for customers. It'll be what I call the customer center, which is our customers right here under sales. And so here's where we can create a new customer. Okay, give it all of its information, addresses, all of this stuff. Okay, that's where we can create our new customer. Vendors is very similar. Let's go to expenses. Under expenses, we have vendors. This is what I like to call our vendor center. If you're familiar with QuickBooks desktop products, that's kind of where I get the terms customer center and vendor center from. I don't think they technically call it that in QuickBooks Online. But here we have, again, our vendor center. And we can create a new vendor by clicking here, or if we want to import a bunch of vendors at one time, we can go down here to import vendors. And that's how we create a new vendor. So now let's talk about customizing our invoices a little more. So again, we're going to have to go to the cogwheel, account and settings, and then here go to our sales settings. Now, part of customizing your invoice is going to be making sure you have the right sales form content and the product and services set up properly, because that's going to determine what fields are available on your invoices. So you want to make sure you get that set up properly. And then by going to the customize look and feel button, we can actually customize colors, layouts, things like that within our invoice. And so here you can see some of these invoices have been uploaded, so you can actually create invoices in a PDF file. QuickBooks Online will help you map them to the fields within QuickBooks, and then you can upload them. Now, the only problem with that is once you do that, you can no longer customize them within QuickBooks. They're simply a PDF. So let's open one of the templates that were not imported. So this template here was created purely within QuickBooks Online, and we can see the template here. Now the template, the dimensions are off a little bit on this because of this my monitor, but when you print it, it will print on a normal 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. So you can do all sorts of fun stuff. You can change your fonts, you can change your layout, you can splash on some color, you can customize what the emails say that go with the invoice. So if you're really interested, look at this, play around with it. It's pretty user friendly. However, if you have some more questions, we do have those 46 free online tutorials, and those do cover in a lot more detail how to create these invoice templates. Now, the final thing I want to talk about today for our customizing the company is setting up our products and services, and this is very, very important for any company that sells inventory. So we're going to go up here to our cogwheel, and under our lists we have products and services. Now, any inventory items you have, it is incredibly important that you set them up as an item within QuickBooks. So let's do that. So here I'm going to come new, and I'm going to set up an inventory item. Okay, I'm going to give it a name. If I want to, I can give it a SKU number. So let's just call it a widget. Okay, it's not a subproduct, so if I have multiple widgets and I want to be able to see them all grouped together, I can make it a subproduct. We can give it an initial quantity on hand. Once you're up and running, so when you first set up your QuickBooks, you may have to enter a quantity on hand. Once you're up and running and all of a sudden you decide you're going to start purchasing a different type of inventory, your quantity on hand, it is required, but it would just be 0. Okay, so you can go through here, fill out this information. The reason it's so important that you properly classify inventory items as inventory is that QuickBooks Online will calculate your cost of goods sold and your ending inventory. A lot of your less expensive software will not do that. So it takes the amount you spend purchasing inventory and it automatically separates that into what is the cost of the goods that we've sold, which gets deducted from our income, and what is the cost of the inventory that's still sitting in our store, which goes on our balance sheet. So that directly affects the amount of your net income. And so QuickBooks Online will automatically do that calculation for you using what's known as the first in, first out inventory method, or FIFO. But in order for QuickBooks to do that, you can't just make purchases and assign them directly to a chart of account. It has to go through an inventory item. Very, very important. So make sure you set up each one of your inventory items here in the inventory list. Okay, again, I cannot stress the importance of that. Now, if you have products and services, I highly recommend setting them up. They're not as important as inventory, but if you have a product or service excuse me, that you sell, you can come in here and set it up as a service item. If you sell the product or service to your customers, you can set up a sales price. If you purchase this service from, say, a subcontractor, you could click here and you could put the amount that you generally pay for it. Okay, and one last thing I want to point out before we leave the products and services discussion is that these products and services, whether it's inventory or whether it's a service, they get mapped to your chart of accounts. So when you go in and you enter an invoice later, that invoice is not going to be You're not going to choose an account from your chart of accounts. From the invoice, you're going to choose an item. That item is then mapped to your chart of accounts. This is actually really, really nice because that means you can really minimize your chart of accounts. So you may only need one sales account. And then if you're interested in what it is exactly that you're selling, you can go look at reports by item type. So here, if we set up a service item here, whatever that might be, we can map it to this income account called revenue. If we want to track the sales of inventory and the sales of services separately, we can without creating more than one revenue account. We simply create the revenue account and we map each of those product or service items to that revenue account. So now when we create an invoice, we're not going to select revenue as the account. We're just going to select the service item on the invoice. So you'll see when we get to invoices, you have a choice. You can either charge an invoice directly to a chart of account, or you can choose it to an item, and then the item will map it to the account. And again, the big benefit of this is that you have all sorts of reports available by item, so that you can get more detail than if you were to not use items and map everything directly to account. So for this service, we have both a revenue account, so when we sell this service to our customers. Down here, since we're purchasing this from a subcontractor, we also have an expense account we can choose. So whenever we use this service item in a purchase transaction, it will take it to our, we don't want purchases since this is a service. Let's instead put it to something like contract labor, right? So we purchase a service from a subcontractor. Anytime we purchase it, the expense will go to our contract labor account. Anytime we sell it, the revenue will go to this revenue account. And then if you want to know how much profit did I make on this service, you can print reports by that service item rather than trying to pick that up out of your income statement or out of your trial balance. Okay, so this keeps your chart of accounts very simplified. You don't need a separate purchases and revenue account for each item you want to track separately. Okay, so enough about products and services. Something to learn more about if you're interested. It's a really powerful part of QuickBooks Online. So now let's talk about working with customers. Let's talk about sending invoices as well as printing sales receipts using the undeposited funds account. So let me share my QuickBooks Online with you. So here we're at our dashboard. To send a new invoice, let's go to our new button, right? That's where we like to initiate our new transactions, and go to invoice. Let's choose a customer. Let's say Bridget O'Brien. So QuickBooks Online populates all the necessary information here. We'll go down here, provide a service date, and we can just use today's date. And then let's select the product or service that we provided. Okay, and that's going to be $42. If we want to look at what our invoice is going to look like, we can go to print or preview. And this will bring us up a preview of what our invoice to Bridget O'Brien looks like. Okay, so if we want to print it and mail it, we can print it from here. Let's close this. If we wanted to email it, we could select save and send, and that would email Bridget a copy of this invoice. For our purposes, let's just save and close the invoice screen. Now, when Bridget pays us, we need to record the receipt of that check against the invoice we just created. So one way to do it would be, again, to go to the New button and go to the Receive Payment Transaction. We could select the customer and select exactly which invoice or invoices we received payment for. But let's do it a little bit differently this time. As I said before, there's a lot of different ways to get to the same screen in QuickBooks. Let's go through the Customer Center. So let's go to Sales and Customers, and let's find Bridget's detail. So here's Bridget. Click on her name, and this gives us the details of all of our transactions with her. Okay, so here we can see the invoice for $42. Okay, so if we want to receive payment on this invoice, we can just click the Receive Payment button right here. So let's hit Receive Payment. This is going to bring up a list of all of the outstanding invoices we have with Bridget. This is the only invoice we have, so we're going to make sure it's selected, and we're going to collect $42. Before we do that, let's select the payment method. So she's going to pay us with a check, and now deposit it. So we have a couple of choices here. If we want to, we can actually show this as a deposit made directly to the checking account. Okay, but now if we do that, it's going to show a $42 deposit in our check register. So we need to think about what's going to physically happen with this check. So we're going to take this $42 check. If we're going to take it and deposit it by itself into our checking account, then we can show this deposit going directly to the checking account. However, if we're going to combine this check with a bunch of other checks onto a single check, onto a single deposit slip, and make a big bulk deposit of numerous checks, then remember, our bank statement is going to show the total amount of the deposit. It's not going to have any breakdown by checks. And so if we were to make this deposit in our books directly to checking account, then that's not going to match the deposit total shown on our bank statement. So what we want to do is make sure we group checks together into a single deposit that then will match our deposit that's shown on our bank statement. That's going to make reconciling our checking account much easier. QuickBooks Online is a little confusing to learn, but once you get the hang of it, this undeposited funds account is really slick. So we're going to collect additional checks today. So I don't want to show this as this single check being deposited. I want to hold this check in our undeposited funds. So think of this undeposited funds account as like your desk drawer that you're sticking all the today's checks in, or maybe it's a paper clip. You're paper clipping all the checks together for a deposit at the end of the day. So that's what our undeposited funds account is. It's this holding account for checks until we actually group them together and make the deposit. Okay, so here we go. We've received payment. Now as soon as we do this, this is going to offset that invoice, right? So the invoice has now been paid. So even though we haven't put the check into the checking account yet, we have received the check, and so the invoice has been offset and shown as paid. Okay, now invoices, you use that if you're providing a service or product and the customer will be billed and paid, and they will be billed later and pay later. If the customer pays at the time of service, then you don't need to do an invoice. It's all one transaction, right? You provide the service or good, they immediately pay. There's really no reason to do an invoice. Instead of an invoice, we want to do a sales receipt. So a sales receipt records both the income and the cash at the same time. So let's do a sales receipt. Let's go up to New and a new sales receipt. So this has all the same information as the invoice plus information about what you did with the check that you received. So let's create a sales receipt. Let's do a different. Let's do Brian Tublin. Okay. So Brian Tublin, all the information pre-populates. Now we need to choose how is he paying us. He's going to pay us with a check, and we're going to deposit that check. Again, we're going to put it into undeposited funds so we can group it with the rest of the checks for today and make one lump sum deposit. Service date, let's just use today's date. The product or service, we'll just pick something at random here, bathroom sink, for $125. So he came in, picked up the sink, immediately paid. We're taking his check and we're putting it into undeposited funds. So we can save and close that. Actually, let's look at a print preview of this. Looks very much like our invoice, except that it says sales receipt. So we give them this. They know they don't still owe us. It's not an open invoice. This is a receipt for what you've already paid us. Now, when they have an outstanding invoice and they pay us, don't issue a sales receipt. You want to make sure you take that payment and offset it against the invoice. If they want proof of payment, then you send them an invoice, and the invoice will have the words paid on it. So don't issue a sales receipt when you're collecting payments on an outstanding invoice. Sales receipts are only for if no invoice has ever been issued. Okay, so that is our sales receipt, and we're going to save and close it. Okay, so now we've collected two items, right? We've collected two checks. It's the end of the day. Now we want to deposit those checks. How do we do that? We're going to go up to New For a new transaction, we're going to come over here to Other and go to Bank Deposit. Okay, so here we see our two checks. We have a $42 check from Bridget O'Brien, and we have a $125 check from Brian. Those are being added together for a total of $167. Now, if you have other checks you want to add that don't go through the normal customer invoice sales receipt system, you can add those checks here. So perhaps the owner gives you a check, they're going to contribute a little bit of money to the business this month. This would be where you could enter that owner's check, or maybe it's a tax refund or something that doesn't go through the normal income process of the company. So you can always add additional funds to your deposit on this screen. But right now we're just depositing these two checks for $167. And the key here is if we were to look in our check register, the deposit will show as $167. That can be very easily tied to the $167 deposit on our bank statement. Again, without undeposited funds, it would show up as two separate deposits. It'd be very hard to tie to our bank statement. So let's hit Save and Close. And we've made our bank deposit of $167. So that's the very basics of how you send invoices, receive payments, or perhaps receive payments and immediately issue a sales receipt. Again, that's in case there were no invoices sent. Now let's talk about receiving and paying bills from our vendors. So we're going to learn how to input an unpaid bill, how to view those unpaid bills, and then how to pay bills by check. And kind of as a bonus, let's talk about how to record an expense without recording a bill first. So let me share my QuickBooks Online with you. So first, let's record a bill. So we can go to New, and then under Vendors, we're going to record a bill. So a bill is when you receive an invoice from a vendor, right, but you haven't paid it yet. So we're going to enter it as an unpaid bill, and then QuickBooks can be used to help remind us to organize our bills and help us to remind to pay them. So if we're going to pay an expense immediately, then we're going to enter it as an expense. But if we're just entering the bill and not paying it yet, that's when we're going to use this bill. So let's enter a bill, and let's enter it. Let's say we bought some inventory from 123 Plumbing Supplies. So we select that vendor. QuickBooks will fill in all of the information we need. Now, if we put the payment under category, this is going to record the payment directly to an expense account. Now, since we're buying inventory, as we talked about earlier, we don't want to record it directly to an expense account. We need to use an item. So here, let's select the item that we purchased. So the piece of inventory that we purchased from 123 Plumbing, and let's just say we purchased a bathroom sink for, actually let's choose a different one. That one doesn't look like it's completely set up. Let's select, we're buying some of these mirrors. We bought a lot of 10 of them. Okay, so $220 to 123 Plumbing Supplies, and let's save and close it. So now we owe them $220. Okay, so if we go to our vendor center, expenses, and then vendors, we should be able to find 123 Plumbing Supplies, one open bill. Let's look at the detail here. $220. Okay. Excellent. So that's the bill we want to pay. Looks like there was another bill in there from an earlier exercise. But we want to pay this bill for $220. Now, there are ways to pay bills online through QuickBooks, but let's keep it simple and let's just pay it with a paper check right now. So we can do Make a Payment, or we could come up here and we could click New and Pay Bills. In fact, let's do that. If we wanted to, we could initiate it down here, but let's go up here to Pay Bills. Okay, now we need to find notice it's got every one of our open bills, right? So we owe four different payments to Cecil's Lockworks. Okay, so we can pay all of these at one time, but all we want to pay is the 123 Plumbing Supplies. We're going to click that. Oh, that's the wrong invoice. That's the $840 one. We want down here, we want the $220 one, or the $220 one. Okay, so we're going to make this payment for $220. Let's hit save and print. So now it's going to give us the option to print a check. Okay, and so from prior exercises, we've made payments that these checks are waiting to be printed, but we're just going to print the one check today. So let's hit print preview, and here is our check. And then you'll just need to make sure, obviously, you have the correct check stock to run through your printer. But here is our paper check. Excellent. So that is how you pay your bills in QuickBooks Online. Now, let's go quickly. So if you don't receive a bill first, if you're just paying the expense immediately, there's no reason to run it through a bill. You don't have to do two separate transactions. You don't have to enter the unpaid bill and then pay it. You can simply record it as an expense. So let's go new, vendor, expense, and let's just do the same thing again with 123. 123 plumbing supplies. Okay, and we can tell it where we're going to pay it from, and let's just say it's from our checking account. Okay, and we're going to pay it with a check. And again, we can come down here into item details and put what we bought. And we'll say we bought 20 of those. Okay, and so $640. Now, if in addition to this $640, we want to pay this outstanding bill, we can add it to the check and have it all just one check. So that's what this is doing. It's reminding us that we have an $840 outstanding bill with this particular vendor. But all we want to pay right now is the $640, so we can hit save and close, and that will record that payment. Okay, so that's how you manage your bills, enter unpaid bills, pay those bills, and also how you can enter expenses directly without going through the bill process. So next thing I want to talk about is managing your bank feeds. I'm not going to be able to show you a lot of detail in this section because this QuickBooks Online, as I mentioned before, is really just our kind of sandbox for demonstrating and investigating things in QuickBooks Online. You can't set up a fake bank account, and so it makes it very difficult to illustrate a lot of the bank feeds activity. We do have, again, those 46 free tutorials. We will go into a lot more depth there if you do have troubles, but let me show you where to get started, and I think it's fairly user-friendly. So let's go back to my QuickBooks Online account. And this is the banking center here. If you want to get here, go to Transactions and Banking, and that brings you here. To set up your account, you're simply going to go to Link Account, and then from here you'll find the name of your company, and then from that point forward it's going to be different for each bank because each bank has a little bit different requirements. But you got to make sure you have internet access to your bank before you start this process, because what QuickBooks Online does is it uses your login credentials. So you'll need your username and your password from your bank's website. QuickBooks Online uses that to log in as you, essentially, and download your activity. It'll then maintain that live connection and periodically download activity for you. Okay, that's all there is to connecting your bank. A lot of software does this now. QuickBooks Online is really, really good at doing it. I've used other free software that does the same thing, but it's not nearly as consistent. With the other software, I'm constantly having to reconnect banks. QuickBooks Online is really, this is a strong attribute. Now, once those transactions come through, you'll get the opportunity to categorize them. So on this screen, you'll have a list of all of your expenses for review, and you can come through here and you can either confirm that this is in fact the transaction that you're talking about, or you can give it additional details. So here I can categorize it as something else if it was. So a lot of times you will have already entered the activity in QuickBooks, and then the activity will come through the bank feed, and you can match that activity up. If it is a transaction you've never recorded in QuickBooks, then you can record it right now on this screen. So that's the essentials of how the bank feed works. Again, it's very hard to demonstrate in a sample account because we can't really create a fake bank account. So the next thing I want to talk about is how to do payroll within QuickBooks Online. So I'm not going to show you a lot of the detail here. This is a very complicated topic, and we do have a series of 5 tutorials that's part of our bigger series of 46 tutorials that deal specifically with managing payroll. So here is my QuickBooks Online account. So if you're at your dashboard, to activate your payroll, you go down here to Payroll and Overview, and that'll give you an opportunity to activate payroll within QuickBooks Online. So your screen won't look exactly like this because we do have payroll activated already. But very, very seamless. You'll be able to enter your paychecks right here. Everything will automatically flow to your financial statements. Any time that your employees enter that can be charged to clients can also be used then to run payroll. So it's very seamless. If you use QuickBooks and you have employees, then you should absolutely be using QuickBooks Payroll. Very, very handy. Please check out those detailed tutorials we have in our free QuickBooks Online tutorials. And the last thing to talk about is printing reports in QuickBooks Online. So to get to our reports, let's go to our left menu bar and click Reports, and you'll see a lot of reports. So I have the basic financial statements highlighted here. So I've got the balance sheet, the profit and loss, and the statement of cash flows. So you can go through here, and there are hundreds of reports in QuickBooks Online, and any of them that you like and want to refer to often, you can place a star next to. So for instance, balance sheet comparison, if I click that star, it shows up there. Okay, I don't want that, so I'm going to unclick it and it goes away. So let's look at our balance sheet. Now it's going to pull up a balance sheet as of October 26th, that is today's date. If we like how this is, we can simply print it. There's a lot of customization we can do just right here. If we don't want to show every single bank account, we can just click that and compress it. We can even compress all of our current assets if we want. So you can control the level of your reporting just right here on the face of the financial statement. Okay, other customizations, the basic customizations are right at the top here. So we have a year-to-date balance sheet. We can show our columns by quarters. So if we hit, anytime you change that, then you need to hit Run Report. Okay, so here is our balance sheet by quarters. We could also, instead of the accrual basis, we can just hit one button and it prints a cash basis balance sheet. That's really, really handy. If you give your tax person an accrual balance sheet and you have to file cash basis for your tax return, they're going to have to spend time manually converting those to cash numbers. With QuickBooks, you can print either cash or accrual with the click of a button. That is really cool. So let's go back to just displaying totals. You could also select a comparison period. So let's just compare it to the previous period. Again, make sure you hit Run Report. And it shows us October 26th of 2022 compared to October 26th of 2021. So up here are kind of some of the basic options that you can use. If you want to further customize it, you can come over here to the Customize button. Some of the features are the same over here, but you also have a lot more details. So we can format the number, more detail on the rows and columns, some filters for the transactions, and a header or footer if you'd like to place a header or footer on the balance sheet. So some additional customization options over there. Once you set all of those, we can hit Run Report. Okay, once you're satisfied with your report, if you need to print it, just hit your printer button. Okay, and there is going to be your printed report. Excellent. Okay, so again, all of your reports are basically set up the same way. They give you a very nice kind of pre-formatted report. You can select basic options here or customize it further here. If you've made a lot of customizations that you want to save, you can just click Save Customization. Give this report a special name, like we will call it my favorite balance sheet. Okay, and we'll add it to our report group. I guess I don't have report groups yet, so let's just hit save. Okay, and now we should over here in reports have a favorite balance sheet report. Okay, and there it is. Excellent. Okay, that's how you print reports in QuickBooks Online. I encourage you to take some time and go through the reports. Tons of really useful reports. One of my favorites right here, unpaid bills. This helps you decide who you need to pay, gives you all of the bills that are unpaid, how far they are past due, coming down to then a total balance of all of your bills. Very, very handy when cash is short and you're needing to decide exactly which vendors need to be paid. Okay, that is our unpaid bills list. Great, so that is reports in QuickBooks Online. Great. So again, this was our big overview of how to use QuickBooks Online. We have much more detail in these 46 free QuickBooks tutorials. Here is the link that you need to go to. You'll find this video on that homepage, as well as links to all of these other 46 tutorials that include both screenshots and videos. I'll also throw a link below this video in YouTube to get to there. If you are just now exploring QuickBooks, if you'd like a 30-day free trial, I will throw a link in the description to QuickBooks in order to get a free trial as well. So I hope this was very helpful to you, and I will see you next time. My name is Tim with Fit Small Business.